Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Good to be here at the, they say don't call it the 92nd Street Y. Oh, no, no, no. It's now called the 92 NY. Good to be here at the 92 NY, or as it is known in the publication world, the place where literal aspirations go to peak. Good to be here. Thanks very much. We'll be talking tonight with the writer E.A. Hanks. Now, Ms. Hanks allegedly worked for the Huffington Post and Vanity Fair. She joins an august group of people who allegedly worked at both places. She has been a contributing writer to the Washington Post, the New York Times, and The Guardian. She has written this book, E.A. Hanks, A Memoir of Family and the Open Road, and we will be talking about this very thing for the next 45 minutes to a half an hour. Let's bring the young writer out. 45 minutes to an hour. Ladies and gentlemen, E.A. Hanks.
Thomas.
How do you do, young? Go ahead.
Thomas.
She's been interrupting me all her life.
Oh boy.
Yeah. How's the press been going? How's the Beast been treating you?
Oh, you know, no one's asked me what's it like to talk to a volleyball, so it's going pretty well.
Shall we get the Forrest Gump cameo out of the way right now?
Yes, just,
all right. You were in that.
Yes, my best work to date, Mean Girl on Bus.
And what was unique about your role as Mean Girl on the Bus?
That I was the only kid who didn't get paid.
That's right. This is true. And it was a very hot day on that bus.
2 days. 2 days.
2 days.
Two.
Very hot.
Yes.
Very hot. We'll get to some of that later on.
And other traumas.
All right, kid. Let's begin this talking about the uniqueness of the geography of your life.
Yes.
As you quote a couple of very famous people in regards to your personal history, location is destiny. But you have two very specific locations that you could call the origin of your destiny.
Yes.
What are those?
Those are Los Angeles and Sacramento, California, which might as well be different planets. They have completely different senses of themselves and their role in California, and which one is better.
Both have different life forms and oxygens, breathable
yes,
atmosphere.
different gravitational pulls, different existences.
Well, now, if you say you're from Los Angeles, I know for a fact that you're from the multiple aspects of Los Angeles.
Yes.
You are from North Hollywood, Studio City, Sherman Oaks, Brentwood, the Pacific Palisades, and currently Hipsterville, East Los Angeles.
Yes.
Right? The land of Uber.
Yes, and tattoos.
In regards to Sacramento, you are from Sacramento.
Yes, yes, yes.
What is that twin sense, then, of belonging that produced E.A. Hanks?
Well, I think it's a bifurcated existence, which is, you're going back and forth between two cities that absolutely hate each other, two parents that don't speak to each other, and two cultures that have nothing in common with each other.
And as you were young,
yes.
How did you make that trip?
Well, my older brother and I would fly to Los Angeles on a Friday and return on a Sunday, and absolutely psychologically destroyed an entire generation of air stewardesses.
You guys fought a lot.
Yes, there was an incident in which black pepper was poured into my eyeballs because I couldn't wash it out on the plane.
And occasionally, though,
It's a very small sink.
You helped out the flight attendant.
Yes, I believe the comfort that they gave me for the black pepper being put into my eye was that I got to help pick up the trash.
All right. So.
And people would say, "Little girl, why are you crying?" And I would say, "'Cause my brother put pepper in my eye."
By the way, this was at a time when your father could park at a parking meter at LAX
Yes.
and just wander up to the gate and pick you up as you came off.
Yes, it's true.
Can't do that.
It was another time.
Well, those two locations if you had spent your entire life in one versus the other, would you be E.A. Hanks, the writer?
No, absolutely not.
So in that case, the twin locations is a destiny.
It's it's the making of me, because I think my existence at home was one of remove. Because I think if you've grown up with the specter of violence around you, you are not in relation with the person who could threaten you. You're observing them, you're watching their moods and their tones, and is it a good day or a bad day? So it puts you in the stance of being a 7-year-old reporter, but my beat was my mother and her moods. So it means that I got very good at being in my own home and yet not living there in its fullest extent.
In talking about your mother's moods, the 10 makes reference to Interstate 10.
Yes.
That goes literally from the Pacific Ocean in Santa Monica to the Atlantic Ocean
In Jacksonville.
In Jacksonville, with a trip that you made twice.
Yes.
So tell us about the first trip that you made when you were 13, 14?
14. So the book is my 2019 recreation of a trip that my mom and I took in 1996 after I basically switched custody. I lived and grew up in Sacramento with my mom and my elder brother, and there was a sort of ongoing attempt to get me out of there and to switch custody and come to move to Los Angeles with my dad and my stepmother and my 2 younger half-brothers. And there was always this sort of requirement that we never quite reached. Things had to get bad enough that I could get pulled. And eventually that Rubicon was crossed, and the wheels were set in motion legally to get me out of there. And once that happened, my existence basically switched. Now I lived in Los Angeles, and I visited Sacramento. And it was the first summer after that schism that Mom announced that she had bought a Winnebago, and we were moving into it, and that we were going to drive to Florida to visit her mother in the small central Florida town where I discovered 4 generations of my family of women had been scratching out existences, and then we would go on to the Atlanta Olympics. So
of
1996,
yeah, okay. 94.
Yeah. So, we moved into this Winnebago at a time when she was not speaking to me. The only time she would speak to me would be to send me into, a gas station to pick up more cigarettes or make her more coffee. So it was kind of, it was slightly, as I lay dying, Yakuvanava County. It was well, I got a book out of it, so it all worked out.
Yeah, that's all, that's good. And the second trip, that is the substance of the 10.
Yes, the second trip is prompted in part because I had been pitching this magazine story that was really, I pitched it along the 10 because I knew it from 1996, but I was pitching this magazine story about 4 distinct political theaters that I saw really coming to a head along this artery through the American South, which was immigration, climate change, infrastructure, and voter suppression. And I can't believe it, but no magazine editor wanted Tom Hanks's daughter to write that story. I don't know. And so I was aware that there was something about this pitch that was not working and wasn't resonating. And around the same time, I'm realizing that as I head into the back half of my 30s, it's entirely possible that I'm not going to have a life that I really intended to have. I'm kind of coasting. All of the coping mechanisms that I picked up in my childhood are not helping me anymore. They're actively working against me. And in the midst of this realization and this kind of creative lull, I finally go through a collection of my mother's papers, which I had stored away after her death and didn't look at. And I find this journal of hers in which she describes witnessing her father, who she never spoke of because her history was behind a curtain of secrecy and illness and addiction and just strangeness. And so I pick up this journal and I read her description of her father committing a hellacious crime. And the way she describes it is that she witnessed her father rape, murder, and cannibalize little girl. And when I read that, I realized that I, like many people who were in relation with my mom, had the experience of being deeply shocked, but not at all surprised. And I think the way that I dealt with that shock was to deal with it as a reporter, which is to, here's a mystery. I can solve this, but it's going to require a journey, a trip, and putting myself in these places that I don't understand. But I have this hunch that this culture of the South, which is as alien to me as I am to it, might hold the secrets of what exactly happened.
That's a powerful way to start a journey across the country for the second time.
It's true.
Could you let's do this like a beginning and a middle and an end of the trip, shall we?
Yes.
Let's start at the Pacific at Santa Monica on
Yes.
Highway 1. Would you read the first passage?
I can't believe you're asking me to do this. I'm not prepared at all. Oh, here's the Post-it.
This is from one of the very early chapters of the 10th.
Yes, this is actually from the introduction. I am setting out on the road because I never knew what Mumat Ahiko meant until I thought to ask. I am starting this journey because I am yet another girl trying to make sense of her dead, crazy mother. I want to understand the land that made her, to see if it made me too. Because somewhere my mother stops and I begin, just like somewhere in the McClure Tunnel, the 1 stops and the 10 begins. Something magic happens in that tunnel, something that I think is wholly American. I am going into that tunnel, I am heading east, and I don't know who I will be on the other side. Forget Mumat Ahiko, who the hell am I?
Mumat Ahiko is a street sign. Right there by the one.
Yeah.
And there isn't a person who is driven by and said, who the hell is Mumat Ahiko?
Voila.
And Mumat Ahiko, in fact, is?
Mumat Ahiko is a word in Shoshone, which is the native language of the indigenous tribe of Southern California, the Tongva, and it is Shoshone for breath of the ocean.
Isn't that beautiful?
I think so.
Yeah, very, very Santa Monica-ish,
Yes.
I would have to say.
Yes.
All right. We will speak more about your mom and
Please, otherwise I'll have to write a book about it.
the complicated aspect of what her narrative
Yes.
was, right? And part of the journalist part of you that was making this trek, because you have always been a historian and journalist ever since you were a little kid, is searching out that version of what is the actual truth versus what is the narrative that we all need in order to substantiate our place, right? And your mother definitely had that by way of this kind of, well, what I think tortured interpretation, or how would you call it? That
The description in the journal?
well, the description of the journal and the other aspects of the paranoia that
Yeah,
that you suffered.
so my mother was someone who heard the voice of God and was in conversation with him. My mother is someone who thought that doctors were being paid by her ex-husband to murder her. My mother is someone who would tuck me into bed and say, just so you know, there's a man hiding in the closet waiting for us to all fall asleep, and once you do, that's when he'll come out and kill us all. So she had a relationship with the truth that was never malicious, but the product of her own kind of brain chemistry. That, you know, we would have an argument, and that would, you know, be a teenager saying, you know, I don't want to go to that. I'm going to go to my room and listen to music. And in her telling of it, I was screaming and throwing things at her and slamming the door and tried to set the house on fire. And it's not that she was exaggerating, that's how she remembered it. So but there was always a grain of truth in her version of events. And I think when I read the accusation in the Red Journal, there was a degree to which I thought, I have to find out how much of a grain of truth is in this. Because if any part of this is true, that is something I will have to reckon with.
There was the red journal and there was the white binder.
Yeah.
What was in the white binder?
The white binder was a collection of her poetry that she wrote over around 2 decades that I was kind of aware that she did, but had never read. And when I was going through it, I realized that a lot of the poems covered the trip that we took in 1996. And so her poetry is in the book because it's her version of events.
And there was some lovely poetry in that book.
Yeah, I think one of the many narratives my mother had was that she was a sort of thoroughbred put out to pasture too soon. She was benched by what I call catastrophic fame. And she had this idea that she, if only Turner and Hooch hadn't come out, she would have stood a chance.
Yeah, that ended a lot of careers.
Yes, including almost yours. Certainly the dog's. So, she had this sense of herself as an artist who missed her shot. And I think anybody who has buried a parent recognizes when the conversation becomes one-sided. And the conversation I've had with my mom has been one-sided for now more than 20 years. But, working with her poetry and taking it seriously was a way to make that conversation two-sided again.
Rightly so, there are some splendid and wonderful memories of your mom.
Yeah.
She did things extremely well and beautifully many times.
Yeah. What's complicated about her is there were good days and bad days. There were kids at my school who were not allowed to come home because after a sleepover they would say, Liz's mom keeps a shotgun by the bathroom door. Or there's a revolver in the sewing box where they keep the clickers. That's what we used to use to turn on televisions, by the way. If there's anyone young in the audience. Yeah, a clicker. A remote.
And there were other kids that thought you were
And there
the
were
coolest.
other kids from my life outside of school for whom my mom was the coolest mom in the group. She let me dye my hair whatever color I wanted. Dinner could just be like, here's a roll of cookie dough. And that was great as a kid, So it was a truly bipolar existence.
So there is a very specific truth and a very specific narrative to your growing up as you did with your mom. That continues along on the road. And I think the journalist part of you would go off on a little bit of a side trip in order to weigh that truth versus narrative, sometimes in hilarious manners. Can we talk about the tourist attraction that is the OK Corral versus what actually happened at the OK Corral and the way it's presented now?
Yeah, so the shootout at the OK Corral did not happen at the OK Corral.
That's a tough
Whoops. The shootout at the OK Corral happened in an alleyway next to a photography studio, and now if you go to Tombstone, they'll charge you a ticket to park, they'll charge you a ticket to walk down the street, and they'll charge you a ticket to watch a reenactment of the gunfight at the OK Corral, which they've now built a wall around, so you can't watch. But it's this, it's this kind of creaky old circus carnival, amusement park that you kind of walk around and everything is just kind of encased in amber. But there's the saloon where the longest poker game in history was played. And then you find out, no, maybe not really. Maybe not.
The gunfight probably lasted, 90 seconds, right?
That's long. It was probably under a minute.
But the show you see recreating it lasts about how long?
Yeah, and then if you go home to replay, Val Kilmer beautifully dying of
we recommend,
tuberculosis.
by the way.
Yeah,
God
exactly.
bless his eternal
precise,
memory.
Yes, exactly. He was our Huckleberry.
Okay, now that's a benign version of truth versus narrative. There's another one. As you drive across, so we've gone across Arizona,
Yes.
New Mexico, we're now into Texas.
Yes.
And you had an extraordinary day on what should be one of the most hotly contested bodies of water in the world, which is the Rio Grande. Tell us about your day at the border between the United States of America and Mexico.
Yeah, So when I was driving through Texas, I thought, like, when the hell am I going to be near Marfa, Texas again? So I veered off the 10 and I went down to Marfa. And I was on a tour of the Chinati Art Foundation, which is the artist Donald Judd basically bought up an old army barracks in middle of nowhere, Texas, and moved his entire body of work into an army barracks camp that was used for POWs during World War II. And
Groovy spot.
yeah, it's very cool. And it's for us, not so much the POWs.
Well, I'm going to say the 92
Right.
and Y crowd would probably
Yes,
dig Marfa,
I think
Texas.
they would probably dig it. But the tour guide who was showing the art noticed me taking notes, and she said, "Are you a journalist?" And I said, "Yeah." And she said, "Oh, you should come to the Fiesta Protesta." I said, "What's
The Fiesta
The Fiesta
Protesta.
Protesta is a party that happens right on the border between Texas and Mexico, and it's one day where the Border Patrol looks the other way. And they have a party in the river, in the Rio Grande, and they set up a music stage on the Mexico side and a music stage on the American side. And everyone just comes and barbecues and brings their kids and their dogs, and everyone just has a lovely time. And you'll hear like norteño tuba music for a little bit, and then you'll hear lap steel guitar for a little bit, and everyone just goes back and forth and hangs out with their families and shares tacos and beers and gets sunburned and stoned and has a great time. And there's Border Patrol there, and they all just kind of like stand there, and they got their hands on their vests looking very serious. But it's a day to celebrate what life used to be like, which was that families could meet in the middle.
Can you tell the difference between an American family and a Mexican family?
No, you cannot.
Can you tell the difference between, anymore you could tell the difference between an American dog and Mexican dogs?
Precisely.
It's just pretty much, it sounds like a combination Ford commercial and a Cialis commercial at the same time.
That's exactly what I thought.
Well, that's what anybody would go
This
through.
looks just like a Cialis commercial. I know what those look like.
Now, to get a bit back to the persona in the cast, there were really, let's call it 4 people that were in this Ford
Transit.
A great car, by the way. You
Very
tricked it
good
out
car.
quite beautifully for camping. There was you.
Yeah.
There was your mom.
Yes.
There was the grandfather that you never knew, who was
At the center of this crime. Yeah.
John Dillingham,
John Raymond Dillingham, my grandfather. Yeah.
who was a career Marine.
Yeah, he was a career military man who had multiple Purple Hearts, and he only quit the armed services when all 3 of his sons joined up. And at some point, he was going to go off to Korea, and his eldest son at that point was also shipping out. And the Army said, no, we can't have both of you out there.
So there were, and he and your grandmother had 4 kids. Do you know when the marriage ended?
It ended in the late 50s when he was going to be shipped out to Japan, and she said, "I'm not moving these kids to Japan." Right. And that
and
was
he got remarried later on.
He got remarried later on, very briefly. That second marriage did not last long.
So you were with us. Your mother had passed in a time. She died of lung cancer,
Yes.
based on the heavy smoker that she was.
Yes.
Your grandfather John died of
drink.
Of drink and time. But there was also someone else in the car.
Yeah, I had set out on this trip. It'd been 20 years since my mom died, so I was not in the immediate splash zone of grieving her. And my grandfather was this ghost who had kind of been around my entire life, but always in the corner of my eye. You could never really look directly at him. In the 8th grade, I peeled off from a school trip to Arlington National Cemetery to look at his gravestone, and I took a picture of it. And when I came home and told my mom, she didn't speak to me for 3 days. And wouldn't make me breakfast, wouldn't talk to me, wouldn't look to me. I mean, it was complete ice out. Just his name. That was it. But what I did not expect when I set out on the trip is that I was in active grief for a friend of mine who had passed only months before. And my dear friend Scott, who had chosen to end his life in the months, in the year before. And I had completely, 20 years you get really good at grieving someone, but I was very good at grieving my mom, who had died of cancer. And I had no idea how to grieve a friend who had died by suicide. It was I had no idea what I was doing. And it wasn't until I was halfway through the trip that I realized, I'm writing this book about death and grief that I think I'm so wise and I give such good advice for. And then it turned out that while I was, doing all of this other work, this tidal wave of pain and grief and suffering was creeping up on me.
He was in a rock and roll band, he was an artist, and he was a very close relationship for you.
Yes.
He writes, and you quote in the book, "While I'm alive, I'll make tiny changes to the earth." That's a lyric from one of his songs.
That's a lyric of one of the songs, and Tiny Changes is the name of his suicide prevention charity that his family has kept going since he passed. But I had to say, when I was in New Orleans, I was walking along the levee near Jackson Square, and someone had put a sticker with those lyrics on the fence over by the Great Mississippi. And so Scott and his urging us to make tiny changes while we have the opportunity was with me all the way.
Well, ain't that a testament to the eternal power of words?
The work remains.
There you go. Now, before we talk about New Orleans, I'd like to bring up these two words that you are all going to be talking about this subject tonight. I swear you will. Can you please tell us about feral pigs?
You and the feral pigs. There's so much shit in this
Tell
book.
the people
You're
about
obsessed with
feral pigs.
Okay, feral pigs. Here we go. Here's my 2-minute TED Talk on feral pigs. Feral pigs are causing $2.5 billion worth of damage in the United States every year. And the government is only spending $30.5 million trying to rein them in. They will, in the next 5 years, be running rampant from our southern border all the way to our northern border. They have gone from Nevada all the way to New Jersey. They're gonna run us out of town.
Has anybody heard about feral pigs in the news? My Lord, this sounds like that movie with Clark Gable, Marilyn Monroe, and Montgomery Clift. They were wrangling up feral pigs in Nevada.
That's exactly what I thought.
And you saw feral pigs
Yes, everywhere.
on your trip.
Like truly, that's a bit. But yes, I saw my first dead feral pig right on the border of California and Arizona. I saw them all over Texas. I saw them all over. I think I ate one in Louisiana, and then I saw them all the way in. Literally, the 10 covers California, Arizona, New Mexico, Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Florida, and I saw feral pigs in each one of those states.
You're going to be telling everybody. I swear you will. Will you please read section number 2, because we're now about in the middle of our trip across America. You have crossed over from California into Arizona, New Mexico, into Texas, and you're headed towards New Orleans.
Yes. Arbitrary beginnings and endings, like state lines, mothers and daughters, before the trip and after the trip, are starting to seem increasingly just that, arbitrary. Like the 10 amalgamating into existence from the one, like the swamp creeping out of the desert and vice versa. I'm staring at this pig. I'm staring at this pig thinking that I need to change how I understand exactly what it is I'm doing. The trip is just a drive I'm taking. The adventure is a journey. The trip will end. The journey won't. Just like my mother and I don't end, like the interstate. What am I hoping for? Closure? Peace? I've read enough stories to know that you don't get to choose how the story ends. And if I can't get square with that, I'm going to sink like a horse in a swamp.
Okay. I think everybody who has lost their parent understands what you're talking about. Yeah. Our relationship with them never ends. Our conversation with them never ends.
Yeah.
And our journey with them never ends. Okay, we'll talk a little bit about New Orleans because you lingered there to write, correct?
Yeah, New Orleans is the only city in the book that gets more than one chapter.
And why is that?
I think New Orleans is singular in America because most cities' culture are defined by money, and money has the same culture. Money culture is the same in any city, in any country. It's museums and the ballet and charity auctions and all of that. In New Orleans, the culture is set by the people who wouldn't want to go to those things and can't afford to go to those things. If Los Angeles ran on the same hierarchy of influence, the culture in Los Angeles would be set by the abuelitas who sell tamales on the corner. New Orleans is a street up culture, and it's responsible for the first great American art form, which is jazz.
Do you think anybody in New Orleans thinks, I got to get out of this town?
I think they think that every other weekend. It's you know, New Orleans is, as someone said to me in the book, New Orleans can give you so much, but when it takes big, scary bites.
And yet you hunkered down there for the better part of a month in order to, what was your routine?
Well, you know, throughout the trip, I would wake up in the morning and write down everything that had happened the day before. And New Orleans was a place that I knew a lot of people. I could rent a house kind of like for an extended time. And I knew the city pretty well because there was a period of time where I was actually going to move there from here. And I realized that I was at the halfway marker, and I needed to start to kind of, because I knew I was writing a book as I was on the trip, so I knew this is a good place to kind of start to see the building blocks come together.
So there was no connection in New Orleans with your mom or your grandpa?
No, when my mom and I did the trip, all she did was smoke and drink coffee and drive. The only place we stopped was in Tombstone because she was a huge aficionado of the myth of Tombstone, and we stopped in El Paso because we had family there. But she had no interest in the Grand Canyon or New Orleans or the Alamo or nothing. It was cigarettes, coffee, silence, and driving.
Oh, okay. All right.
Great.
Let's enjoy. Let's stop. Let's get some slides from the trip, shall we? We're reaching into our snack basket of destiny here. We have a number of anecdotes in order just to bring up. This is from your book.
Yes. Okay.
You wrote it or mentioned or you talked about it. Oh, can we talk about your quick tour of the Honey Island? There in the swamps outside.
The Pearl River swamp and the Honey Island swamp are swamps on the far eastern side of New Orleans, which is filled with feral pigs. And has a really fascinating cryptid legend, which is they have a version of Bigfoot, which is called Letiche, Le Grand Letiche, which is the Catholics thought it was an unbaptized baby.
Okay.
On brand.
Your mom might have had a comment.
Exactly. Right, exactly. The indigenous peoples believe it was a changeling that was stolen from their tribe and raised up by alligators. Mm-hmm. Okay. And the Cajuns just think it's a cousin who got lost. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Tell the story about the guy who, the climate-denying guy, climate change denier who ran the tour. So, you know,
I'm on this tour, and it's not one of the big fan boats, because that can scare off wildlife. It's me, actually a friend of mine who was visiting from Scotland, and a mother and son combo who were having a great time. And I asked the gentleman, because he grew up in the swamp and he knew it by the back of his hand. And it's actually a bayou, which means that waterways change constantly, so it's very easy to get lost. And he just it was so obvious that he was of this place, loved this place. And I said something, how is your home changing with climate change? And he said, that's not real. And I said, okay. And he said, that's people trying to take my truck. And I said, okay. And then about 2 minutes later, he said, we used to have to evacuate every 10 years, and now we have to evacuate every summer.
An example of narrative that one needs in order to get by. Let's return to the
basket of destiny.
The snack basket of fate. Here is another anecdote.
Yes.
From your trip.
Yes.
Across America on the 10.
Yes.
Asking questions about things we take for granted. You interviewed a lot of people, experts around the area in order to ask questions. And from the perspective of a visitor to any one of these spots that you stopped at, there's a lot of things your average traveler would take for granted.
Yeah.
But you were asking questions about things that might be contrary to what you take for granted.
Yeah, there was, when I was kind of conceiving of the book, I would say, like, everyone knows Arizona is different than Louisiana, but how is Arizona different than New Mexico? How is Phoenix different than Tucson? And what do those differences matter to anyone who doesn't live here? Well, when I was in Phoenix, I interviewed this woman who was just a friend of a friend, and we were going to get coffee, and I said, so what do you do? And she said, oh, I advise the Navajo Nation. I said, on what? And she said, well, over 50% of the Navajo Nation has just been fired from the local coal mine. And they're being wooed by many companies to move in solar power to replace the coal mine. And I said, there's a coal mine in Arizona? And she said, yeah, and it employs a massive part of the indigenous population here. That's the verbiage she used. Okay. And I said, well, there's coal in Arizona? What?
Ooh,
yeah, exactly. And so I think there's a through line of the book of, like, you don't know what to ask until you put your body in these places. You know, you don't need a crazy mom and a famous dad to get curious about who you are and where you're from. But I think you can reward that curiosity and deepen it by going to places you just have no idea what's going on, and walking in and saying, hey man, what's good? What's happening here? What's the chat?
You and I were talking, you said there is some questions that nobody wants to answer, but there was one question that everybody will.
Yeah. I figured out really very quickly, that you could not start a conversation with, what's your relationship with your mother like? That did not go well, especially with people who are not used to being interviewed. And almost all of the people I spoke to were, civilians, alligator wranglers, and people advising the Navajo Nation on green technology, and a random Cajun guy I two-stepped with in New Orleans. And to get, private civilian citizens to kind of share on a level, the easiest way to get there quickly was to say, tell me about your hometown, because that sense of location is identity, or that location is destiny, meant that in asking someone to tell me about their hometown or where they grew up, they would inadvertently show their whole hand, because the nostalgia or the anger or the sadness with which they spoke about place told me everything I needed to know.
That's just the power of really great conversation.
Yeah,
isn't
it's
it?
the hang.
Yeah, a great hang. When did you hit the wall of humidity?
I hit the wall of humidity on my 37th birthday, driving from Marfa to Houston.
May 17th.
May 17th, yeah.
From Marfa to Houston.
Yeah.
All right, so you're out of the desert, and all of a sudden, bang, here comes humidity.
Yeah, excuse me, not Marfa, San Antonio.
San Antonio,
me.
okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
That's when I got out of the car and just went, oh, I'm in the South. Yeah.
Do you remember the first time you felt humidity, having grown up in California, which we read about it?
Yes, yeah.
We had never experienced.
Yes. The first time I experienced humidity was in 1990, when we were in South Carolina shooting Forrest Gump.
Yeah.
And I went outside and said, what the fuck is this?
Yeah.
Why is the air heavy? And why doesn't it go away when the sun sets?
It's the trade-off with fireflies is not worth it.
I might push back on that.
Okay, all right, fair
But then I lived in Brooklyn for 8 years.
Oh, there you go. So she got used to it.
Hey.
Without an air conditioner, hello.
Yeah.
All right.
That's in the book.
Frozen sheets. Okay, we're now going to jump. You have made it to Palatka, Florida, where the last time you were, you saw your mom become a daughter to her mother.
Yes.
You are now in Palatka, Florida, and pretty much everybody is gone. And you're going to the library. What did you do when you finally got there?
Well, I went to the library. because that's my first instinct anywhere I go, is to go to the library. And I literally sat down at a microfiche machine searching, it's like, I don't know, Florida, cannibalism, 1962.
In order to
Yes.
find out if there was any sort of like
Yeah,
record
so
of
I
a crime.
literally started combing through years and years and years of crime reports, autopsy
Hinted
reports.
at by your mother's red journal.
Yes, yeah. But you know, what I inadvertently found by accident was 4 generations of obituaries and birth announcements and baptismal announcements and marriage announcements and divorce announcements, not having anything to do with my grandfather, but these generations of pale bog Irish Scotswomen who look exactly like me and have been living in this southern town with a population of 10,000 people for about 4 or 5 generations.
Where is Palatka in Florida?
Palatka is squarely in between the Ocala National Forest and Jacksonville. It's not Cuban Florida, it's not Jewish Florida, it's not Disney Florida, it's not
winter Florida.
It's Florida.
Ooh. That's different from those other Floridas.
It's a different thing.
Yeah. How long did you stay in Palatka?
I stayed in Palatka about 4 or 5 days. Yeah, my skin crawled the entire time I was there. I was just incredibly uncomfortable and absolutely terrified that someone was going to look at me and go, "Hey, you look like a picture I saw on a wall once."
Okay, this leads in. Okay, you're now coming back.
Yes.
We'll leave the slideshow in the basket of destiny
Thank you.
there. You quote Alice Miller. Who is Alice Miller?
Alice Miller is the author of a pretty seminal book of self-help and psychology called The Drama of the Gifted Child. Now I'm going to interview you. Did you find it dramatic to have a gifted child? No.
I found it intimidating. I found that it was equal to getting your ass kicked every single day when you're just trying to make them breakfast.
So she wrote this book that was essentially about how much of our lives is determined by your mother's trauma.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. She wrote, and you quote her, "All childhood histories are unique."
Yeah.
Which leads us into a quote from, you can introduce, who told you that we don't get over trauma, we get on with it?
Yeah, that's from my very wise therapist, whose name is Dr. Jane Greer. And, you know, she and I have been working together for about 2 decades, and this doesn't exist without her and the work we've done together. But when she and I started working together, I was really trying to figure out how much of this am I responsible for? Am I on the Titanic headed towards an iceberg and there's nothing I can do about it because these are my genetics, this is the first 7 to 8 years of my life and I just got to ride this out? Or do I have some control over whether or not I have a good life? Because I had built up all these skills to survive this childhood, being funny, being quick, being observant, being sensitive, but also always being on the outside. And now I realize I know how to joke with people, but I don't know how to be close to them. And none of the relationships that I have the level of intimacy that I want in friendship, any of them. And she said to me, I think you're trying to solve a problem, and your grief is not a problem. It's something you live with. And that process of making friends with your grief is substantial and worth the effort.
On the way back, you fill in some of the blanks of that red journal.
Yes.
By meeting your uncle.
Yes.
Your mother's brother,
yes.
Bruce, for the second time.
Yes, the first and only time I met my mother's siblings was in 1996 while on that trip. And when I got to Florida and Palatka and discovered what I discovered, I realized there was really only one more place I could go for answers, which was her siblings. And, you know, my mother was 1 girl and 3 boys. Your family, 1 girl, 3 boys. my family, 1 girl, 3 boys.
It's a conspiracy.
Yes, it's true. Thank God I don't have kids. And I realized that maybe the only thing I really know how to do at this point is to talk to someone's brother.
And were those blanks filled in?
You're going to have to buy the book. He and his wife were incredibly generous to me and invited me into their home. And, he opens the door, and I go, wow, that's what my mom would have looked like if she had only got more time. My mom died at 49. I'm 42. And Bruce looked at me and said, oh, I remember that face. And his generosity in speaking with me, a lot of people have asked me how you feel about this book, how my older brother feels about this book, but that's not the only people's lanes who I've swerved into. I've also swerved into Bruce's significantly. And his generosity in speaking with me can really not be overstated. And what he said to me was that my mother was a sensitive, troubled, sad little girl, and that he understood her as much as a brother understands a sister.
There are blanks filled by that answer.
Yes.
And yet the mystery remains.
How much do we ever understand what it is to survive our childhoods?
What's the difference between truth and narrative? Based on that, can you please conclude our trip across America on the 10 with reading number 3?
Yes. I think there must be something between the truth and narrative. As much as narrative can give us meaning, it can just as easily deceive. I took to the road in an attempt to find out what really happened, to divide truth and narrative. Back home, in my own big bed with music on my own radio, I look over the white binder one last time before setting it on the shelf, next to Yeats and Whitman and Plath. Reading my mother's words was a conversation with her on her own terms, and she told me that she lived honestly in accordance with the story she needed to survive.
You say in your book that the truth ends all conversations. And I think I added, and starts new ones.
Always stepping on my line.
Did you write that?
No, that's you.
Am I wrong?
I'll throw you it too.
Am I wrong?
No, you're not. You're not.
Am I egotistical by trying
No. I think the book begins with 2 epigraphs. One is Joan Didion saying that the fact that she was from Sacramento determined the course of her life. The other contrasting view is Georgia O'Keeffe saying where I'm from has absolutely nothing to do with who I am. It's what I've chosen to do with my life. And she was also a person who said, "You can tell me what you think my flower paintings are about, but I decide what my paintings are about, and I'm saying they're flowers." And I think the book reaches a conclusion that I call divination, which is that you have to put your body in places you have to be open to receiving truth, no matter where it comes from. So I think it's not about, is Joan right or is Georgia right? Does place mean everything or nothing, or is it truth that is external that we piece together, or is truth internal that we manifest? I think the more important question is, have you positioned yourself to be open to truth no matter where it comes from? And can you live in accordance with that truth that you recognize? I think ultimately that's more important.
You have a friend that says beautifully that you cannot, I paraphrase it, you don't get to choose when the trip changes you.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yeah, my friend Brandon Presser, who's a travel writer who is in the chapter about Houston, he says that you don't get to decide what the trip is about, and you don't get to decide when the trip will reveal itself. That happens in its own good time.
Do you have any sense now when that trip revealed itself?
I think there's a moment, it's a nothing moment. I'm in the van, I'm in New Orleans, it's somehow raining and sunny at the same time, and a piece of music comes on that is so beautiful and so mysterious that it paralyzes me. And I realize that I've never been so grateful to be in a gas station parking lot eating fried chicken and realizing that I'm in conversation with my mom for the first time in 20 years, and she doesn't make any more sense to me, but we now see each other more clearly. And this has all happened because I thought to ask, who are you, Mom, and what happened to you? And just that one kernel of curiosity begat a 6-month adventure that changed the course of my life. And the truth is that anybody can have that experience, and you can have it anywhere. I recommend the fried chicken, it helps. By the way, it was from a gas station called Hank's.
There you go.
It's a great fried chicken gas station in New Orleans if you get the chance. And that the trip revealed itself as like, it doesn't have to be the aha moment. It doesn't have to be lightning striking, but sometimes it will be.
You have completed a trip, not unlike completing a book. Inside the 10, there is also a fabulous symposium on how driving habits reveals psychological truths of the people that you are passing. And there is a complete sub-story that is a tale all of itself about a scoundrel of a pit bull that climbs into your car in what city?
San Antonio.
In San Antonio. That is an adventure unto itself. The pit bull's name was? Blanco. An incredible saga. There is magnificent stops along the way, both right on the shoulder of the 10 and hundreds of miles and perhaps decades of years on either side of it. I'm your dad.
Correct.
I've always been a fan of your stuff, but you've written one of the best books I've read in the last 10 years. Ladies and gentlemen, E.A. Hanks. I guess that's thank you very much. And I just found out backstage from Sue the worst news that could possibly strike the Upper East Side. Shakespeare and Company at 68th and Lexington is going to close its doors due to rent. So let's see if we can't postpone that enough with a literal fisticuff-laden stampede to it to pick up new copies of the 10 and copies of any other book that you might want to have for your home library. Thanks very much, E.A. Hanks. Thanks very much for coming every night. Take care.